Call the meeting to order. It's meeting of January 19th. We'll note that Commissioner Jackson is absent. All other commissioners are present. First item of business is the order of business. I'm aware of one change, and that would be under the consent agenda. We would add item C, which would be approval of Kirkwood Bank contract for financing the snow blower. Are there any other changes to the order of business? Hearing none, with that change, would there be a motion to approve
So
the
moved.
order of business? We have the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. The motion carries. Then the second item is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda you wish to discuss? Hearing none, would there be a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll move to tab 5, Public Safety, and Chief Seebuck.
President Johnson, Commissioners, through the month of December, we logged 24 responses, 24 different incidents, and I'm pleased to say that although we had some very bitter cold weather, we had only 2 incidents that were possibly caused by improperly discarded ashes. We had 1 general alarm, and we had only 1 call of alarm being generated by frozen sprinkler piping. So for some very bitter cold weather, we got through it in very good fashion. And actually, that's all I have for my report this evening. Didn't mean to stop you in mid-drink there, Mr. Mayor.
Well, just for the benefit of the public, that was a drink of coffee that,
I can see it from here. I
Yes.
can see it from here.
yes.
That's all I have.
There have been some meetings I wish I had been drinking, but not this one, so.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the chief? All right, thank you. Chief Rummel.
Good evening, Mr. President, Commissioners. I don't know if I can beat that record that Mr. Seebuck just set, but I'll try. Before you, in your packets, you have the December Traffic Services Report from Sergeant Dustin Dossinger. There were quite a spike in accidents, as you can tell. There were 148 in the month of December. Of those, there were 4 reported injury accidents, and I'm sure this is all weather-related. There were a total of 11 school zones contacts. 9 of those were citations, and 2 of them were warnings. The following pages is the year-end report for the traffic services, and as you can see, there was traffic accidents were up for 2009, over 36% from 2008, and so we did see a spike. Hopefully, we'll see them for next year go back down, and hopefully the weather will cooperate with us a little bit. But those are basically, we're going to continue to do the things that we need to do to ensure a safe community, and one of those things are going to provide high visibility enforcement for next year, utilize the speed board more, as we did last year, conduct radar surveys, and do the extra patrol during the busy times of the year. So hopefully we'll maintain and go down in the accidents and go from there. So, and an unrelated item that's not on this packet, yesterday at 5 o'clock, our captain, Stuart Stenberg, who served almost 20 years with the Dickinson Police Department, officially retired. And so we wish him well. He did a fantastic job for us while he was with the department, and we're going to greatly miss him. So the process for reorganization will begin, and part of that will be promoting captains, hopefully soon as we move along here. So, with that, if there's any questions or comments, I'd be glad to entertain those right now.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor, on
for Chief Rummel, on that spike in accidents. I know we had a tough couple of weeks there. Was it snow-related, or was it ice-related more so, or visibility where they couldn't see around the corners? Because I heard all.
Probably both, probably both. The snow was banked up, and so there's some visibility issues at intersections, but there was some ice and snow, compacted snow that contributed to these accidents as well. So it's a little of both.
Okay, thank you.
Chief Rummel, I noticed, and still do today, but especially right after the heavy snowfall, when streets were most hazardous, a number of people talking on their cell phones and driving, and could you comment about that as a non-safe practice and how that can contribute to accidents?
It truly is, and we really try to encourage people to pull over to the side and not to talk or text on their cell phones. There is a safety message on Channel 19 that we're trying to get across. Bill has put it on Channel 19, and it airs every now and then, showing the dangers. And it is a main contributor right now of accidents, is talking and texting on the cell phones. I can't remember what exactly that whole segment said, but I do know that it is equivalent to driving DUI for distraction. So that is a real hazard, and it's something that I think you'll see the legislature possibly address the next time they come into session. I do know some states that already said, it's illegal to drive and be on the cell phone at the same time. So I have a feeling more and more states are going to look at that.
I know in those first couple of days after the crews were able to get out and start clearing snow, that the streets were hazardous enough without talking on the cell phone. You add that distraction in, and it gets to be very hazardous. So
Yes. And even as a city, we're addressing cell phone use as city employees as well. So it is something that needs to be addressed, and we really discourage from doing both those, particularly texting. I think it takes all your attention, really. So thank you for that, yeah.
okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Steiner.
to comment on the same subject there, there have now been a couple court cases where, not in the state of North Dakota, but I'm assuming it's going to be coming, where a young driver was on the cell phone and had an accident, and someone was seriously injured on the other side. And they were able to bring in the fact that she was on the cell phone at the same time by getting their cell phone records and establishing that she was on the phone when this accident happened. And that was some of the contributor negligence. So I think we're going to see some actions on this.
I believe so too, Mr. Steiner. Yep. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Well, we'll move down to Public Works, tab 6. Mr. Soren.
President Johnson, City Commissioners, at the last meeting, the issue of snow gates was brought up, and I was tasked with looking at some pros and cons regarding the use of those in our snow removal practices. I have done some research, talked with the City of Bismarck, talked with the manufacturer of snow gates themselves. In my endeavors in looking at this, some of the things I'd like to point out in looking at snow gates, the positives that are there depending on the snow event, obviously, as it does or can reduce the amount of snow that is deposited in the driveway. Now, that's all relative to the amount of snowfall we get and or how much we've had in the past in going through clearing the streets as to the actual benefits to that. In talking with the manufacturers of the snow gates, he indicated that the initial design of them was the intention of parking lots where you're trying to increase the capacity of a loader, for example, to push snow and pile it up in parking lots where you can push straight ahead. Dead-end streets, where you're trying to carry a lot of snow to the end. Not so much with the blading of streets where you're trying to keep it out of driveways. However, there are a few communities that have done that, and, in his comments stated that some of the issues you got to be concerned about is obviously if you hit a curb with them, the damage that's caused. Once you get a snow ridge or an ice ridge in place, if you catch that, you damage them. And he said that his experience says that a life expectancy is about 2 years before you either have to replace them or you have substantial amount of repair work to do on them when used in that fashion. So they are a very high maintenance piece of equipment. The amount of snow that they're effective at, in talking with Bismarck, they feel they're real effective at 5 inches or less, could be 4 to 6, kind of that range. Once you get over that, they find that it spills out, and it still puts the ridge of snow in front of the driveways, and then they get the complaints that people feel they're not using them even though they are. They've also found a substantial loss of production when they went to these in the Avenue, 30 to 50%. Bismarck themselves actually have added 8 people, full-time personnel, along with 4 pieces of equipment to accommodate for the loss of production to try and maintain the standard of snow removal that they've had in the past. When it comes to the amount of snow, I do know Jamestown this year over Christmas actually took them off because it wasn't effective for them at this point, during the snow event that they had. Contractors, we use contractors for it. It would require them to purchase them as well. Obviously, there's some issues with that when it comes to the repairs, or cost per hour or how we handle that, but it certainly would be something we'd have to work with them in regards to it. My initial contacts indicated that they were anywhere from 10 to 25,000. When I was talking with Snowgate, he told me that kind of their small one for a backhoe size runs about 6,000, and it takes about 8 hours to put on, but it's relative to the size of equipment you have and the size of Snowgate that you would want for that piece of equipment. Likewise, what the equipment's capabilities are, if it's already got the hydraulic system set up for it, or then that changes. If you have to add that, that's an added cost as well. So without going through each piece of equipment, it's difficult to get, but it looks like it's probably going to be closer to, that 10,000 range from talking to them. With our fleet, the way we have it right now, we have 8 pieces of equipment that we would need to put them on, so you're looking $80,000. We do have contractors with approximately 6 pieces that they use to help us, so that would be their cost. So, in my research with it, it kind of comes to a cost benefit. They're going to be a high maintenance, and I don't know what the cost of the maintenance would be on them, how often they'd be in the shop. There is a loss of production on them, which is obviously a concern. We hear those complaints as much as we do about the driveways getting filled in, that we're not there quick enough now. So that has some concerns for me. As well as trying to work through the issues with the contracts, which I think are all doable. We just have to decide what cost we can put on it that we feel is a benefit to the citizens if we were to go that direction.
What is the hourly rate right now for our outside contractors?
I think we're paying 110, I believe, with the operator. Is that right?
Questions or comments for Mr. Soren?
Mr. Mayor, I think an important factor that to keep in mind is the length of time that it would take the city crews to actually clean the streets. If you're saying worst case scenario, we're talking a 50% increase in time, people could be looking at 3 or 4 days before you actually get your street plowed out versus 2 days now. That's an important factor that I don't think people just don't see how much time, extra time is lost with that snow gate on there. versus a blade just going down the street and getting the street plowed out. If people have to stay snowed in for 4 days, I think they would really have to stop and consider whether this is a good deal or not.
Thank you, Mr. Frenzel. Other comments, questions?
Yes, I have some. I've taken a lot of heat in the last month regarding the snow removal process, and people are really, really strong about getting their driveways not plugged in, you know, and I've asked Tracy Tews to come tonight and tell us what his prices and if he's willing to use snow gates and how it would help and what it would slow him down, how much it would slow him down. I already talked to Bruce Schneider from Big K, and he said they're willing to put them on also, and their cost would be probably between $8,500 and $9,000. And he said if they get the go just one time, you know, they'll just do both directions at one time, and that would speed up the process. On the south side, the longest it would take them would be like 14 hours. I would like to hear from Tracy what he's got to say, too.
Commissioners, thanks Shirley. I guess we're willing to add them. I agree with a lot that Sean says. The efficiency rate is definitely going to go down. Sean's price is a little more accurate. I don't know Big K's equipment, but I do have prices for our equipment. It'd be $11,100 for our blades to hook up the snow gates on 2 of them. We wouldn't hook it up on our 3rd one. We'd hook one up to our angle plow that we use, and that would be about $8,500. The efficiency ratio is going to go down. We do basically the north side from the interstate north. There's a large industrial area that we do that the snow gates probably wouldn't be even used. But they're high maintenance. They definitely slow you down. And in my 15 years here in Dickinson, I think I've helped out the city about 13 years. We probably wouldn't have used them with the exception of the last 2, is my theory. Our cost to set it up would be about $30,000. Sean's very accurate on that. And for the maintenance and what I've built over the last 13 years, I don't think it would be effective. Am I willing to put them on? Yes. But there's definitely going to have to be some kind of recovery there, I'm sure. Bruce feels the same way, I'm sure. And at this point, if I'd have a say in it, I'd say I don't think it would be cost effective. There's going to be issues with driveways, whether we have snow gates on or not. And I think we're going to damage, there's damage now extensive to the curbs. I think just a little research on how these snow gates look, I think we're going to have a lot more extensive damage to curbs and the stuff that people choose to put out on the curbs now, we're going to drag it with. And when we get into heavy residential areas, such as over on 26th Street and 27th Street and even 25th, it's going to take a lot more time. I think Sean's accurate with 50%.
Do you think 50% more time?
Yes, because every driveway that you go by, you physically got to be going slow enough to actuate the gate up and down. And the average driveway is 20 feet wide. You know,
Probably,
You're
yep.
going down the street, so every 100 feet, you're going to have to drop it for 20, retract it. Watching snow removal the last few times, those blades going down the street are going faster than 7 to 8 miles an hour. And actuating that gate, they're going to have to drop that speed down to 3 to 4. Just their speed, not only just functioning that gate. I'm all for higher bills, but
You're all for more billable hours, huh?
absolutely. But I don't think it, in my opinion, I would not add this piece of equipment to do our contractual agreements that we have for small businesses. our main goal is, I guess, not to damage the parking lots, and these things are very destructive.
Mr. Soren said that some of his research indicated that their life expectancy could be as short as 2 years, or at least heavy maintenance costs in 2 years. Would you concur with his assessment there?
I'd concur on that. I looked through Hinkie, not Snowgate, and their life expectancy that they have on their website is 3 years. They don't have it illustrated on their here, but you're going to have added cutting edges, which the city picks up within our agreement, and you're going to have added wear shoes on the sides. If we're going down the street and we hit a curb wrong, we're going to bend cylinders. It's,
What's the impact, when you're out there, dealing with the snow, what is the impact of having cars on the street? How does that impact you in your efforts to clear snow? And
Commissioners, that's the worst thing, is we can't get close enough to the driveways because people, when there's snow, it just seems that people just start parking and going where they can get, and it's typically not into their driveway. And there's cars everywhere. I was on 14th Street on Christmas night pushing snow for a police unit trying to get to a house, and I couldn't get there because there was cars everywhere, littered on the road. And it wasn't my problem of having a snow gate or not. I couldn't get there with a loader. So,
Well, I would have to say Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, everyone had a lot of out-of-town company, so we could not get by that no matter what. Most people are told to park in their driveways, but, when you have 5 or 6 cars from out of state, where are you going to put them? The other thing, are we talking about on, 14 inches of snow, or are we talking 5 inches of snow? I guess I need to clarify this.
I'd agree with Mr. Soren. After a certain point, having the snow gate is moot. So the last 2 storms that we got consecutive, it would have been a moot issue of having it. It would have been useless. And currently, right now, if we get a snowstorm of 2 to 3 inches, they're a moot item too, because the snowpack on the side of the roads would negate it. You can't get close enough to their driveways anyways, and if you take a tour through any residential area in Dickinson, north, south, east, or west, there's piles that are 3 and 4 feet from the sidewalk that we can't get to. So if there's going to be a 3 or 4 inch snowstorm, that pile is going to be 4 or 5 feet off of the curb line anyways. And I've seen the last couple of weeks, the city's been trying to widen roads. That's going to be a stopped issue here pretty quick too. If we go back into a deep freeze, or you just can't bust that stuff loose, or else you're going to damage your $150,000 blade trying to do it. So having a snow gate's not going to help that anyways.
Well, we have a storm prediction for this weekend, and now we already have mounds and mounds of snow. What are we going to do now? That's my,
once the snow gets so hard, then you can't go in and pick that up. Is that correct?
Well, you always can. It's at what cost? If we look back to what March brought us last year, we had that one last blast where we had 5 and 6 foot windrows down Main Street and downtown. It got to the point where, working with the city, we couldn't blow that snow. We had to physically go bucket load it.
It was just too wet.
It was too wet, too heavy, too froze down, and a snow gate at that point, again, is useless.
I guess this is a little different issue off of the snow gates, but are we still trying to widen streets, or has the snow got to the condition where it's just too hard on the equipment to do that?
No, we're continually working on that at this point. As Mr. Two stated, the weather's been conducive to us being able to get in there and try and widen them out and get the things cleaned up as best we can. And we'll continue to do that in areas. We talk about earlier about site distance issues. As we get those, we're going back, and those are created, by a lot of private things, maybe by some of our own issues. We're continuing to try and improve that situation, and it's an ongoing fight. Certainly with the prediction of a foot of snow coming, we've got to get there to try and, because it does create an issue if you can't get it widened out, with that next snowstorm.
I think with our elderly population we have here too, that's a big concern because they've hired someone to clean their driveways and then we come along and block them back in. That's where the anger is starting, Not everybody is able to shovel their driveways like me and Sean and Dennis and some of us in here, but once you get past my age, they may not be able to, and that's where I'm getting all the calls from. And they're thinking we're not doing anything about it. Well, I guess I would like it brought out if the public is willing to pay $80,000 every 2 years,
Actually, I think we might be better off, and correct me if I'm wrong, but once we got into the widening part here, you're doing it with city crews and not with contract crews.
Correct.
I think we might be better off, especially early in the year like this when, that snow's going to stay, is maybe spend a little extra money on the contract crews and help, deploy them to help you widen the streets. Because I'm not convinced that spending money on the snow gates would be the way to go. That just sounds very costly. We might be better off to spend a little more money on outside help, get the streets widened quicker, and then we're kind of ready for the next storm. When we get a snowstorm in March, while it's a major inconvenience, it's going to be melting almost immediately. When we get snow events in November, December, January, that's going to hang around a while longer. And so, that would be my suggestion.
And I would agree with you. I guess when I took over this role, that kind of happened right in the middle of the storm as a whole. But one of the tasks that, I've talked with our street superintendent about was our policy on snow removal. It's, 10 years old, I think, at probably best, with very little look into the process that we do. So we're going to review it, probably for my own familiarity with our own policy, as well as is there things we can do to improve it, to make it better? Is there more contractor work we can do? Is there different type of contractor work we can? When you're dealing with the plowing and it comes time to haul the snow out, for example, I use the example around Trinity High School and the high school Empire Road. When we hauled that snow, it took us 12 full hours with 10 trucks running and a guy on a snow blower and a motor grader. Well, that's like a mile and a half of road. It took us a full day just to haul the snow that was piled up there out. That's not giving us much opportunity to do anything else, and it's taking every person we have available to do it. So you've got a lot of effort concentrated in a small area of town.
Right.
So I think there's some things we can do to look at to see if we need to be dealing more with contractors. Maybe we can get contractors to help us haul so we can free up people to be plowing other areas. I think we've got to look at it and make sure we're doing the best we can.
Well, what you're faced with, and I'll go back to something Mr. Tews said, and I'll probably won't quote him exactly right, but said something about he's been doing this for 14, 15 years, and really the last 2 years have been two of the more major snow events that we've really had in terms of years. So, if you, in a sense, staff up and equip up to handle winters like we just had and are experiencing, you're going to invest a lot in people and a lot in equipment. And then if the next 13 years are similar to what we've experienced in the past, and then you have all this equipment sitting around and you have staff that is underutilized, that's a lot of extra money. I kind of think we're better off to take a more moderate approach with our equipment and staffing at the city, and then when we have tough years, rely more on outside vendors. Now, that's going to cost us a little more for that particular year, but if you look at it over a 10 or 15-year period, I think it's probably the better way to go. If we were going to have, if every winter was going to be like this last winter, then we would staff up and we would equip up to deal with it. But, this is a banana belt in North Dakota. At least it used to be,
Well,
We,
I'd have to agree with you, Mayor Johnson. But we have to do something, that people just don't like the way we've been handling the snow, and I hear it everywhere I go.
Yeah, you do. But what is the one meeting of the year when this room is filled with citizens? It's the Board of Equalization meeting, when we have all kinds of people here, and what do they complain, what do they tell us about that? That their property taxes are too high, that the valuation on their property is incorrect, it's too high, and they don't want more taxes. And snow removal is a general fund item. And, I know we have to do it, but, to what extent are you going to do it? I think you get it to the point where it's livable, where it's not a safety hazard, and you do that. I mean, if the citizens expect that every pile of snow is going to come off the streets, we're going to spend a lot of money on that.
I don't think that's not what they're expecting. I think they just want some consideration, and I know in the past, if someone had their driveway plowed shut after it was over, and they called in, Ken Kusi would send someone back over to get, not everybody's doing it, but this last time was ugly. It's the only way I can say it.
That's very ugly. Mr. Commissioners, one further comment, I guess, in kind of going along with what Sean said, is if the city would have to spend $80,000, and there's more than just myself and the other company, Big K, that does snow removal, that's $60,000 there, that's $140,000. I know there's years in the past when I sat down that the city didn't spend $150,000 a year moving snow. So it's just doesn't work. And in the last 3 years, Mr. Kronk and Mr. Kuzi have used people that have different kind of equipment, such as angle plows on front end loaders rather than blades, because blades can't react fast enough for every driveway. And that's how an additional company in town just set up to plow snow. And the only comment that I've heard after meeting with Mr. Kronk is, if these people are spending the kind of money that I know a local company just spent to gear up for snow removal, it would be good to sit down with Mr. Soren or whoever's going to be in charge of that to know that we all have our portions of town that are our responsibilities, and some kind of commitment on that. Because just right now, if somebody goes out and buys a new angle blade to put on their front end loader, they're putting out a fair chunk of change. And I know the city just bought a new Falls plow that was in excess of $15,000, and it's costly to set up for with a moderate return. And the phone calls do come.
But again, I think we'd be better off when we get into the cleanup phase, maybe not cut our outside contractors loose quite as soon, utilize them to help with the cleanup. We're still probably not going to get all 130 miles, but if we get, more miles than what we're now getting, that'll be an improvement.
Thank you,
But
Tracy.
thank you for being here, Mr. Tooze. Other comments?
Mr. President, just a comment, regarding the last storm, that Commissioner Dukart's talking about, that was a 3 to 4 day event also where, the city was struggling just to keep the main routes open, that people could get to them if they could, where they could get somewhere. With the wind blowing them shut, I know we would open them, and 2 hours later, we'd have to go back and reopen them. I mean, so there wasn't a concentration of going down the neighborhoods and getting there. It was the hospitals, the clinics, the high areas that we need, so that's, with that last storm, I mean, if we can get 5, 6 inches in the night and so on and be done with it, we wouldn't be sitting here having this problem. But in a storm like that, where it's 3, 4 days, we might have another one this weekend for a couple more days, I think the public needs to understand that we aren't going to go out and do any major cleaning until that storm is done. Because it's just too costly to go outside of those main travel areas and do the cleanup and then go back and do it all over again. It's just not feasible or good with the bank account.
Well, I have another comment, though. The storm was Thursday and Friday, kind of was it Thursday, Friday? Yeah, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. And then there were still people calling me on Monday, north, that did not even have a one-way. You were one, Carson. You didn't call me, but your neighbor did. Your street hadn't been cleaned yet either, so we're talking 3 days after the fact.
And that was on my street. And
That storm was still going on Saturday with
Right.
the winds. And so I think in terms of actually really starting to open places up, the crews really got out on Sunday.
Sunday morning is correct.
Yes, and so if someone called on Monday, I mean, that'd be very possible, because again, given all the miles and the priority routes they take, there would be neighborhoods that wouldn't see a plow until the second day or even the third day of a major event like that.
Especially with the amount of snow that was in it. If it was 3, 4 inches, you can go through that a little better than 15,
Yeah,
with the areas that were blown shut and,
I'd like to comment on that. Contrary to what people believe, the insurance or the commissioners' streets don't get first cleaning. The one you're talking about, I think we were the last street, and like you said, it was 3 days later and so on. But not everybody can be first to get their street cleaned out, and I believe you're on a rotation basis, or maybe not. Maybe I'm sure you go to northwest part of town in certain places with a northwest wind. That's where we got to concentrate. If it comes from the southeast, that's what they concentrate on. But cleanup, unfortunately, that's the way it is in life. Someone's going to be first, someone's going to be last. And we don't get ours cleaned first.
Well, I'd have to relate to that. We're in a cul-de-sac, and we're the last ones cleaned. And we usually get one way, period.
well, you gotta be smart enough to live by a school.
No. I understand everything. We just got to do something better. Whatever we decide, we need to do something better, is what what I'm hearing. So it's
Well-
got to be cost-effective, but yet we have to do something better.
I will make one point that Bismarck, in talking with them, he made it very clear that the snow gates were voted on by the people, but their phone calls have not gone down. They still have all the same complaints, it just, when the comment he made to me was, when I asked him if he had time to talk about snow removal, he goes, I bet Bismarck does it better than you, right?
Yes.
And and I said, yeah, that's what I'm hearing. He goes, well, guess what? Fargo does it better than us. And Grand Forks does it better than Fargo. That's just kind of the nature of it all the way around, and we're not going to do away with the complaints. We can certainly improve the process and try and give the best product we can and the best snow removal we can, but you always have to weigh the cost to what that is, because we could have bare streets if we wanted to go there, but we're going to have several hundred trucks hauling and more snow blowers and more contractor help, more people, so it comes down to that.
Do we,
The street crew, if I recall correctly, is like, size-wise, is 7 people. That's what we carry year-round.
8 with the supervisor.
8
yep.
with supervisor. Okay, so we carry 8, and of course, during the non-winter months, then they're working on street repair, doing, potholes and that kind of thing. But when we have a snow event, you actually pull people from other departments in the city to help.
Yeah, our water utilities, solid waste, out of the
Well-
office here, we had people come in. We actually hire people that have worked for us in the past, whether it's summer, whether they've come in and drove truck for us.
So you'll hire contract labor.
Contract, yeah,
Okay.
to come in and help us fill the equipment that we have.
Do we put plows in front of our trucks or not?
I think we have one truck plow. They don't maneuver very well in town, so we haven't really gone that way. It's my understanding Fargo, West Fargo, they use mostly truck plows, but we haven't researched it. Motor graders and loaders seem to work better in the tight areas that we have to deal with.
See, we could be reverting back to 1916. That's what they're saying, the last storm hadn't been that bad. So if this continues, maybe we will,
Well-
that's the year my mother was born. She's 93, and she said, yeah, I don't remember 1916, but I sure remember, the years later that they were all bad, so who knows?
Well, yeah, we could be in a cycle
Mhm.
where we're going to have some tougher winters. It's hard to say. And when you get a major snow event, and even though this one officially was 15 inches, it seemed like an awfully deep 15 inches to me, and must have all blown in from the country, but we had a lot of snow to deal with, and even though we've had some warmer days, there's still, snowbank's still pretty high.
Yep.
So it's a tough issue, but as Mr. Soren said, we have to balance kind of the costs with the service too, and the cost of employment is high. When you figure the healthcare benefits and the vacation benefits and the new employee wouldn't have pension benefits here now, they'd have the equivalent to a 401k, but when you figure the cost of employment, it's very high if you're going to have additional people. I'm guessing that for somebody on the streets, the annual cost of employment is on the other side of $50,000 a year. And that's every year, then, that you would have that for every additional person.
Well, I think contractors are the only way to go, because you only need them certain times, and I would not hire new people for 2 storms, or 4 storms, or 6 storms. What do you do with them the rest of the time?
Okay, other comments? Well, our budget cycle isn't that far off. Actually, Mr. Kessel and I, at our meeting this week, we discussed maybe even getting into the 2011 budget cycle just a little earlier than we did last year. And so certainly we can continue to have conversations and debate over how much money to allocate to street staff and snow removal equipment on a go-forward basis. So. Okay, well, we'll move to administration. Mr. Kessel.
Thank you, President Johnson. Just one last comment on the snow gates. In speaking with Street Maintenance Manager Kronk, he's been with the city for about 18 years, and in his 18 years, he said this last storm was the worst he's seen in that time span. So obviously, that covers a great deal of time and a lot of storms, some very significant storms. So I thought that was important comment to share with the group. The first item that I have tonight is the transit building update. 2 reasons I'm providing this update. Number one is that we are working with the state DOT on constructing a new transit building. That building would be funded primarily through stimulus dollars. There's a $1.1 million budget for construction. It would fulfill two purposes. The first is bus storage. The second would be office space. The potential third use for that building would come in about 2014, when regionalization is expected to be incurred throughout the southwest area. At that time, it would potentially also be used as a transfer facility as other communities bring customers or residents from their communities to Dickinson to utilize shopping, healthcare, and other amenities within our community. So the design will encompass the expansion or potential expansion of this building down the road. The location is just north of the former American Express building and just east of the water tower that's up there. The crew, the SRF consulting group out of Fargo received the bid to design this facility. They have partnered with EAPC, who is the actual architects on the building. We met with them today and reviewed priorities for the structure. I'm not going to go into the building specifics, because those obviously are going to be dictated as the design continues. So, but what I will say is that the expectation is that there will be a mid-June bid on the construction phase of this building. The other reason that I'm providing this report is because the elder care had to vacate its former building, the Baker Building as it's oftentimes referred to, and is now in the Public Works Building on Broadway. I want to thank Skip Rapp and his staff for accommodating that transition and making it easy on both entities. I will mention that Colleen Rodakowski, who is the director of elder care, has stated that she feels like they're in a 4-star hotel. So obviously, Skip is providing maid service and everything else required. So thank you, Skip, and to your staff for making those accommodations. We did have to relocate a couple of our staff members to make space, and they were all very accommodating. So with that, that would conclude my report regarding the transit building, unless there's questions. If there aren't any, the next item on the agenda is the comparable taxable valuation mills. I provide this to you more as for your information. As President Johnson stated earlier, there is a great deal of interest in the mills that we levy to fund our operations. People's property tax, of course, is a function of valuation and of mills and of all of the other taxing entities that participate in mill levies. What I provided you is a excerpt from the 2009 taxable valuation study that the North Dakota League of Cities completes. It is intended to provide you with just some brief information related to the 10 most populous cities in North Dakota, our peer cities, which are West Fargo, Mandan, Jamestown, and Williston. There is a relationship between a high taxable valuation and a low mill. If you look at population centers, they tend to have higher taxable valuations, which means their mill is worth more, which also tends to mean that they have fewer mills. So you'll notice on the large city average, the average city mill was 88.71, and our peer group was 97.65, and for the city of Dickinson, we levied 93.95. So from our peer group, we're doing well. We're below the peer group average. The state average was 96.44 for cities, and we are below that as well. So that is an indication that we are being efficient and effective with our mill values, our mills. I'd also like to point out the valuation. If you look on the second page of this document, I've ranked those in terms of highest taxable valuation of our peer groups. Again, generally, the higher the population, the higher your taxable valuation is. There's a relationship. It's not constant, but there is a relationship. And you'll notice that West Fargo has the highest population in our peer groups, and they have the highest taxable valuation. What I'd like to point out, though, is the gap between the second highest populated city, Mandan, in our peer group, and their taxable valuation, and then us and Dickinson as the third highest population in our taxable valuation. That gap is very, very small, less than $1.5 million. And when you're talking 40 million as the upper limit, that's a very small gap. And in relation, if you look at the fourth most populous city, Jamestown, population-wise, they're actually closer to ours than we are to Dickinson, but yet their valuation is over $11 million less. So I think that's a good indication that the city of Dickinson has done well in the past, and we're currently doing well as well. So I don't have any further comments. This is, again, mostly for your information, a way to maybe answer those questions that you're getting in relation to other communities in North Dakota. The last item on the agenda then was just simply a thank you. It's always nice to receive thank yous, and so I'd like to make you aware when we do get those. And this was for the Southwest Community Service and Restitution Program. They were part of our grant process this year and in the budget. So, with that, that concludes my report, unless there's any further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Any comments or questions for the city administrator? Hearing none, then we'll move to tab 9, accounts payable and payroll. In addition to the payables listed or contained in your book, there was an additional handout consisting of about another 10 or so payments, and we would ask that those be approved also with the ones in the book. So before we take a motion, are there any of the payables or payroll you wish to discuss? Okay, would there be a motion then regarding the payables?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, well, we have to do a roll call vote, don't we? Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Any comments by city commissioners? Anyone from the public wish to comment? If so, step to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. No one from the public, so the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
The motion, the second, all in favor of adjourning,